Hello there, happy people. My name's Eric. I'm with Brent, Ozar Unlimited. And today, because it's something that I ask so many people to do on such a frequent basis, I'm going to walk through some basic steps when it comes to downloading Hallengren's SQL Server maintenance scripts. Now, I love these scripts. Back when I had a real job, they were on all my production boxes in some form or another. Usually, I was doing at least index maintenance and DBCC CheckDB with them. I was doing backups with them as well. Sometimes we did have a third-party backup tool, though. This is something a little bit more enterprisey for enterprisey environments. But for the other stuff, the broom and dustpan stuff that is sort of left to the DBA's discretion, I always used all this stuff, and I was always really happy with them. All the scripts are 100% absolutely positively free. You can get them by going to, I didn't resize that window. Well, come on, window. There we go. You can get them by going to ola.hallengren.com, and right on the homepage, immediately you'll see some news about new stuff going on in the scripts. It has links that tell you about backup, and there's really good information on the site about how to run it, what all the different commands are, all the different stuff you can do with them. The documentation is awesome. That was the backups. This is the integrity checks. You can see that there's just a whole mess of stuff you can do with them. When it comes to index maintenance, there's more configuration options than you could throw all the cats in your bag. To download it, you can download it all as one big thing, or you can download it in separate chunks. I usually just choose to download the entire maintenance solution at once. Now, when you download maintenancesolution.sql, you open it up and you get this file. It's a gigantic file. I'm not kidding. If you ever just want to take some time and read through it, it is actually a dynamic SQL masterpiece. I'm not going to make you read through 4,960 lines. Curiously, that's about the same length as SP Blitz Cache. Holy crap. SP Blitz Cache, as long as all of OLA's store procedures at once. Anyway, you download that, you open it up in Management Studio, and you get this screen. There's a few things that you need to pay attention to when you first crack this open. That's these lines right here. If you already have OLA's scripts installed, and you don't want to overwrite the jobs that you have in place with the schedules and the configuration options, you want to change this to N for no, so that you don't recreate the jobs. Whatever your backup directory is, this is a really good time to change it. Otherwise, you're going to have to change this in all of your jobs that do backups. Same thing with the cleanup time. This is set in hours to how long you want to keep backups for. I usually set it to 168 because that's a week in hours. So, but here for this demo thing, I'm going to set it up to 1 hour because I don't want to flood my server with backups. Now, after you change those few things, you can pretty much just hit F5 and it'll run. And after that, you will have all these scripts all installed on your server. It's amazing how flawlessly that works. Now, this is my little demo VM that I have SQL Server CTP 2.1 installed on. You'll have to forgive me if the refresh on Management Studio is a little bit slow. You can blame Hyper-V if you want. So if we go into Store Procedures and we refresh this, we're going to see all this stuff installed here now. There's Command Execute, which executes the command shell stuff that he has in the agent jobs. There's Database Backup, which it does exactly what it sounds like and does the database backups. There's Database Integrity Check, which does DBCC CheckDB. And then there's Index Optimize. Those are the 4 store procedures that comprise OLA's routines. As soon as this little circle goes away, we'll look at the agent jobs. Come on, little circle. We don't need you. We're not our friend. All right. Here we go. So if we go into jobs, and we refresh the jobs. Oh, come on, little circle. You'd think they'd have this down by now. We have some stuff. You have command log cleanup. Now, this is a fairly important job because all of Ola's procedures log activity and outcomes to a table in the master database called dbo.commandlog. I'll show that to you when we have some data in it. If you take really frequent backups or you do a lot of index maintenance, that table can get really big really quick. You generally want to have this set up to run. I'm not going to do that this time around because it's just not that interesting. I want to get people up and running with the basics first. The other jobs we have two for backups. One is just for system databases, so master, model, and MSDB. The other is all of your user databases. You have full, diff, and log backup jobs available to you. If you're in simple recovery model, you can ignore the log backup job and just focus on fulls and if you want, diffs. You also have two separate jobs for system databases and user databases to do DBCC CheckDB on. Generally, it's a lot easier for people to run CheckDB on 3 of the 4 system databases every single night than it is to run on all of their user databases every single night. Now, for Index Optimize, you only have one job for user databases. If you're running Index Optimize on your system databases, God help you, I'm coming to your house. That's the end of the line for me. I can't take any more. That's it. So how do you set these jobs up? Like, what do they do? What are all the commands you can run? What's all the stuff going on in here? Well, as helpful as it is to have all the scripts set all that stuff up for you, you'll still need to feed them the right variables, schedule them, make sure they have failure emails, and test stuff out. I'll give you a simple example. Over here, I have a command to back up a database on this server to a directory that doesn't exist. What happens is this immediately throws an error. The directory d:\backup doesn't exist. This is on my little crappy VM that only has a C drive and a backup folder here. So if I go and I change this store procedure to go to C:\backup, now it should work. It might take a little while, but this is the output you get. You get the server name, you get all this stuff about the edition, you get the database, and then you see that it started up. This is going to run for a little bit. And we're doing the store verify only because we did the verify option right here. So one thing that all those jobs can automatically do after every successful backup, they can verify it. This is a good option sometimes. It's not a good option all the time. If you have very large databases or a lot of databases, the verify option can greatly increase the duration of your backup jobs. It's also sometimes not trivial to run the verify only. So if you're in a situation where you have many terabytes of databases, or you have many hundreds of databases on a server, I would generally skip the verify part here. You can override the server default and use compress, and you can also back up with checksum using Ola's jobs, which make them actually light years ahead of some enterprise backup products that I've used. But anyway, if we swing back over to the server that's running on, you can see that under the backup directory, it's created a directory with the server name in it. Well, it is the server name, so SQL next to 1, and then it creates a folder per database that it creates for every database that you run a backup of. And then it creates a folder for each different type of backup. You can see here we're taking fulls, so I have one full backup taken. Pretty sweet. If you want to run some other stuff, we can go through that. What we'll do is we'll look at some of the different commands we can run and some of the options that we have for running them. Now, one of the most important ones. Now, scheduling backups is not difficult, right? We'll go into properties of a job. And eventually this will turn on. Eventually. Someday this will turn on. And you go into steps, and this is what the step looks like. Now, fair warning with all his jobs. He runs all his jobs using SQL CMD, or SQL command. And so you have this sort of crazy looking command, and then you have the exec of the store procedure, and then you have all the stuff that you need to fill out to make your backups work. If you want to edit any of this stuff, you can take out verify, you can take out checksum, you can change log, you can just change them in place. Whatever options you use, just check Ola's website so you make sure that they know you know what they're doing. So for backups, there's some popular ones where you can back up groups of databases together. You can back up a single database. You can back up all databases except a database. You can back up any database that has a name that matches a pattern. And, just very configurable stuff over here. You can back up to UNC paths. You can back up to multiple paths if you want, or even multiple UNC paths. There's one thing that I wanted to go over real quick that's very helpful to have on all your jobs. That is the change backup type option. Now, change backup type is really cool for if you have a software product that creates databases for users. So if every user or every, whatever gets a database created, you're looping through, you're taking backups. All of a sudden you hit this database, you can't take a log backup of this database, perhaps because it's a brand new database. If you have change backup type in there, it will take full backup if a diff or transaction log backup can't run. So you want to have this in your differential and transaction log backups if you have software that creates databases on the fly. There's some other cool stuff in here, like you can have it work with backup software like Lightspeed, SQL Backup, or SQL Safe. Pull this up a little bit, it's a little tiny over there. You can also mess with the rocket sciencey stuff like block size, buffer count, max transfer size, and then there are some vendor-specific settings for compression level and all that. You can even do backup encryption with Ola's commands, which is awesome. You can do it with certificates, keys. You can mess with read-write file groups. You can do all sorts of stuff. You can take a tail of the log backup. There's just a million things you can do with these. They're crazy. They're so awesome. Now, one thing that you have to remember, though, is that Ola does not schedule the jobs for you. That is up to you. So after you go through and you add in the configuration options you want in here, the next thing you're going to want to do is go into the schedules and add a schedule that works for you. Now, I can just kick this off if I want. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kick off a log backup just because I want you to see what happens when it creates the log backup folder. After we do this, we're going to talk a little bit about CheckDB and we're going to talk a little bit about the index maintenance jobs. Came up on a different window. So that went pretty quick. Now, if we look over on my VM, we go into super user. Oh, super user's in simple. I'm such a silly goose. Bear with me. I have my databases in simple recovery because I don't want to mess with it. It's the price I pay for not being a diligent DBA. It's funny that the setup for this, like undoing the setup and deleting all the jobs and stuff, is almost less painful than just changing some of this stuff on the fly. So if these database options ever pop up, you'll be able to very easily change them. Well, we wait for that. Oh, not my day. So we set this into full recovery, and we hit OK. And I will just execute one of each job type when we talk about some other stuff. I will take another full, start job step. And this is just a good way to test to make sure that stuff works. There we go, and it's running. So aside from the billion backup options that we have, there are also some good options for integrity checks. So you can, of course, do either system databases or user databases with all the same configuration options as the backup jobs for ignoring or including certain databases. You also have the ability, which is especially handy if you have a very large database, of using some of the more granular commands, like file group, table, alloc, and catalog, which allow you to break a DBCC CheckDB up into multiple steps over many nights. So this is particularly handy for handling very large databases. You can also buddy those steps up if you want and do multiple steps in a single night. You can specify physical only. You can skip indexes. You can do extended logical checks. You can use tab lock if you want to override the database snapshot, which I don't recommend. You can choose file groups, particular objects. You can choose the max stop of DBCC CheckDB if you're on SQL Server 2016 and up. It's a brand new thing. Ditto the availability groups. So let's see here. That's about it. That about covers it for the interesting options in integrity check. Index and statistics maintenance has a lot more to it, but we gotta make sure that some of these other backups are in here. Gotta get my diffs and my folds up so that you don't think I'm making a crank about all the folders and cranks. There I go. That's wrong. And give that a minute. All right. We'll start block back. That goes. We'll talk about index and statistics maintenance, and then we'll talk about how I like to run index and statistics maintenance. So again, same basic setup here. User and system databases ignore certain objects, include certain objects, all that same stuff. There are different values for fragmentation levels. Generally, fragmentation low doesn't get used for anything. Everything that gets used is fragmentation medium and fragmentation high. And you choose which commands you want to run on different levels of fragmentation. So you can rebuild online. You can, if you're on Enterprise Edition, if you're on Standard Edition, you can try to rebuild online, but you'll end up rebuilding offline. You can reorganize, and you can choose sequences of commands. So say you try to rebuild an index online, but for some reason you can't, you can fall back to an offline rebuild, or you can fall back to an index reorganize instead. So you're not stuck just running one command that fails. You can also feed a null to not perform any index maintenance, and we'll talk about what that means in a little bit. The different fragmentation levels you put in here are in percent, so you want to choose a percent in which you want to perform some action on your indexes. You can specify a number of pages that have to be in an index before you perform any action on them. You can choose whether you want to sort in temp DB, just like with the CheckDB command. You can choose max stop. You can change fill factor if you're doing a rebuild. You can also do all that crazy stuff with pad index and log compaction on reorg. And then there's a separate section of commands for updating statistics. So for updating statistics, which is a really important one, which is the one I'm into, I apologize, my mustache has gotten so itchy for some reason. You can do all, only index statistics, only column statistics, or you can skip statistics altogether. I usually choose all here. A really important one is only modified statistics. Now, granted, the threshold here is really low. It's one modification. I would love if this was configurable, but at least it gives you the choice so you can skip indexes that haven't had any changes made to them at all. You can choose the percentage of the sample you want to take. You can specify the resample option. You can do all sorts of partition level stuff. You can skip Microsoft objects, and you can also skip specific indexes on tables or include specific indexes on tables or schemas. It's crazy the amount of stuff you can do. You also get the cool 2014 low priority and reporting after block options, which are pretty cool, because then you don't have these index rebuilds or reorgs that become part of very large blocking chains. Even online, they do have to take out some blocks at the beginning and end of every index rebuild. Again, you have options for availability groups and logging to tables. Now, this should be all done over here, and it is. Sweet. So now if we go back into my VM, we'll have folders for MSDB fake, which has full diff and log folders in it. You can look at the file names, so you can see that it all came up. And super user will have all of those as well. Now, if I run this for system databases, all those will pop up as well. I'll do that just to prove it to you. But while we do that, let's talk about how I like to run the index optimized procs. Now, I'm not going to go into the jobs to show you this. I'm just going to copy and paste that from the script that I have here. Now, if you're on Standard Edition, you sort of have a different set of options than you do if you're on Enterprise Edition. For instance, you can't rebuild an index online if you're on standard edition. You just can't. You have to rebuild an index offline. That you can try to run that command, but it won't work. It has enough logic built into the jobs where it'll change the compatibility. Now, regardless of it being standard or enterprise, what I always tend to do is set my first fragmentation level to 50%. So at 50% fragmentation, I choose to reorganize indexes. At a high fragmentation, which is 80%, if I'm on standard edition, I'm going to rebuild offline. If I'm on enterprise edition, I can change that and I can rebuild online. And then I'm always going to have a fallback to index reorganize. Now, when you write these commands in, there can't be a space in there. You have to leave it has to be one sort of contiguous block of stuff. And when you add these steps into the job, they all have to be on one line or else the job will fail miserably. Going down the line, I like to make sure that I update statistics always. So once a week or once a month that I'm running my index maintenance jobs, I'm also going to update statistics. So I update all statistics, but only modified statistics on this line. And I only like to hit pages or indexes that have at least 5,000 pages in them. The default bare minimum here is 1,000 pages, which is about 4 megs. 1,000 EK pages. I like to go with 5,000 pages because that's around about 40 megs, and that's where things really start to matter. That's where things are much bigger, and you have to actually might benefit from some index maintenance. I know that these numbers seem high, 50%, 80%, because you poor thing, you poor DBA, you have had it pounded into your head for years that index fragmentation is the performance nightmare apocalypse thing that you must defeat on a nightly basis, or else your end users will revolt and there will be pitchforks and torches. You need to reorg at 5% and rebuild at 30%, and the only metric that you were ever given in your entire DBA life was the percent of fragmentation that you reduced. You weren't given anything else to look at. So consider the amount of time that it takes to run index maintenance. Say that it takes you 4 hours to collect all the information and run the maintenance. Are you going to save 4 hours of query runtime after running that index maintenance? Is the amount of CPU and disk that you expended running the maintenance is that investment going to be returned on when your users start running queries? The answer is usually not. I've just never been in a position where I've seen an index rebuild push anyone to the point where all of a sudden, like, that was the tipping point for a good performance. Like, oh, now that we rebuilt the indexes, we're cool. We figured it out. Fragmentation is like having a sort of a messy room. It's not the end of the world. It's not a comet hitting your server. There's no nuclear explosions or burning oil fields. The options you have for these commands, reorg and rebuild, probably need some defining, because people sometimes have a little trouble with them. Especially if you're watching this video about how to set up all this stuff, you might be a little confused as well. See, Reorganize is a lightweight operation. I say lightweight, it's lightweight compared to an index rebuild, but it compacts and reorders the leaf level pages. It applies whatever existing fill factor you have. It can compact lobs. It allows the index to remain online while it runs, but it can kind of block and be blocked, which is kind of a bummer. And it does not require a rollback if you cancel. If you hit cancel on an index reorg job, if you restart the job up, if you started up at the exact same place in that table, well, you'll probably start off right where you left off, and that little Pac-Man will go along and start fixing things. Rebuilding, on the other hand, is heavy. It is heavy-handed. It is mean-spirited. It is just... I hate an index rebuild. It generates a whole new structure for the index. It can apply new fill factor settings, which is probably one of the only reasonable uses for an index rebuild, is correcting someone's awful fill factor choice. If you're on standard edition, it takes the index offline and it runs the rebuild serially. If you're on enterprise edition, it can be online and multi-threaded. In either case, you can choose to sort it in TempDB. It does require a rollback if it's canceled because it is fully logged out and all that stuff, unless you're in bulk log, but even then you have to roll it back. But the one thing that Index rebuilds do that I care about is update statistics. Because updating statistics really is usually what actually fixes a performance problem that people tend to attribute to the index rebuild. Because updating statistics can, of course, refresh the histogram, give SQL a better idea of the data that's in the table. If you have an ascending key problem with your data, that can help with that. It could also just say, hey, look, there's this horrible data skew in here now. We need a new plan for this stuff. And SQL will say, oh, yeah, thanks, histogram. Thanks, statistics. You saved the day. An index rebuild really is just the world's most expensive statistics update. That's really what it is. So if you want to run index maintenance once a week or once a month, just to feel like you did something, go ahead. I'm not going to beat you up about it. What you should be running nightly is this command. And this is where those nulls come in. And when you run this will only run statistics maintenance. Setting the fragmentation levels all to null means we're not touching indexes. We're only updating statistics. We're only updating modified statistics. Now, you can get this job runs pretty quick. We're done. I don't think we updated it. Updating statistics generally, though, is a lot faster than running index rebuilds. Even if I go through here and I do this will run for probably considerable. I have nothing to do on this server with two databases. It's a lot more interesting on a server where activity is actually happening. Anyway, index reorg and rebuild jobs tend to run much, much longer when they actually do some work. Index statistics jobs usually tend to run much, much faster because index updates are a much lighter operation overall. The last thing that we have to talk about is CheckDB. Now, for CheckDB, you really don't have, unless you have a very large database, there's really not a lot of configuration stuff you have to do. About the only thing that I've ever changed in Ola's jobs regularly, aside from on my very large database servers, was the physical only check. Now, I had some servers that had a lot of databases on them, and as a result of that, there was a lot of total data. I couldn't get through a regular CheckDB within a maintenance window. The physical only check helped me get past that. On my big monster databases, the VLDBs, the 1 terabyte and up monsters, probably up to 9 terabytes last I checked, at least in the environment I used to support, I would break up the checks into smaller chunks. How you do that is up to you, and it's complicated. What I find to be much more efficient is to just offload those checks to a new server. Running in place DBCC checks, even broken up into bits and pieces on a production server, you hit these 4 and 5 terabyte databases, and it just takes forever. It's not pretty. One thing that you need to make sure that your DBCC CheckDB jobs do, and this is kind of not negotiable, is you need to make sure that they're outputting job logs. And there's a good reason for that. This window never pops up. 90% of this video is watching me try to look at this. What is that? So when you go into the job step, when you go into the properties, you go into advanced, you need to make sure that they are outputting a file. The reason for that, before we are so rudely interrupted by waiting for this window to pop up, is that when DBCC CheckDBs find problems, when they find corruption, it's generally not 1 or 2 errors. It's generally thousands or hundreds of errors. You're lucky if it's only 1 or 2. The emails that you get from job failures, which you better have, if you don't, you should watch the database mail module. you don't get the full error, usually if it's a really big error. But that error will be persisted out in the job log. You can take the log of that DBCC CheckDB job when it fails, and you can send that off to Microsoft or whoever's going to help you try to recover data after corruption. And it's much easier for them to get that than you have to run CheckDB over again and copy and paste stuff on a management student. So all the commands that you have to, everything is set up for you in here. All the commands that you have to run are laid out for you. It's up to you to really choose the correct configuration options. I'm fine with, kind of leading you the way on how to run index maintenance, but database backups are really going to depend on your environment's needs, on RPO and RTO, business goals, and all that other fun stuff. You might even be able to skip the backups if you have a third-party backup tool that you guys favor rather than this, which I understand because for all of the wonderful, lovely things that Hallengren does, the backups, index maintenance, and CheckDB, OLA does not restore databases for you. It just doesn't. Now, we have a store procedure called SP Database Restore, which can help with that. But if you need to restore to a point in time and you need help reading through the logs, which is difficult, or you just want some enterprisey features, you want to do object level restores, you want to be able to read through a transaction log to find the point rather than just read through and look at LSNs and go crazy. I understand wanting a third party tool for that. I don't blame you for that. Really, though, for the index optimize and for the DBCC CheckDB, you're not going to find a much better solution than always kicking around for free. So this covers kind of the simplest setup and configuration of Olden's jobs and scripts. There's a lot more that you can do with them. For backups, there's AG awareness. There's all the rocket science settings. For indexes, you can skip objects and choose max stop. And for CheckDB, like we talked about, there's breaking the checks up into chunks or DBs or using physical-only checks, whatever, all the other stuff. When you download Ola's scripts, though, make sure that you sign up for the newsletter for when he updates things. The updates don't come often, the bug fixes don't come often, but it's valuable to know when he adds stuff. Ola has also recently put his scripts into GitHub. And I will pull up that because that's important too. He recently put his scripts into GitHub, so so they're sort of open source, and with the advent of that, there may be more frequent changes, there may be more frequent updates. So as soon as I get this website, we'll show you where all the scripts are. So if you go to github.com/Ola Hallengren, you will see his source, all his store procedures and everything are up in here. There's the maintenance solution, the index optimize, and the license is the MIT license, so you can freely use them and you can fork them and make changes and all that good stuff. There's already a pull request and it hasn't been up all that long. God bless Ola, he's gonna have a lot of those. Anyway, that's sort of the basic setup. You enjoyed watching. I hope you learned some stuff about maintenance, especially index maintenance, because a lot of people get this horribly wrong for a very long time. Thank you for watching.